the whole situation with Nintendo and emulators, as you know, Nintendo is very against emulators. They don't want them out there. They don't like them. They don't like people using them. And they know that they believe the vast majority of people are using emulators to play games illegally. I do not have empirical data to back that up, but I think we'd be a little disingenuous if we didn't say the majority of people using emulators are most likely playing games that they don't actually own in any way, shape, or form. But I know there are people who use emulators legitimately to play archived copies of games they do own. So I recognize that audience is out there. I just think it is the considerably smaller audience, but I don't have empirical data to back that up. So there's an emulator called Dolphin. It'll let you play Wii and GameCube games. It's been around for a while, been worked on for a while by obviously enthusiasts, not an actual company. And then we found out that the Dolphin emulator was going to release on Steam. Steam is the digital marketplace owned by Valve, one of the biggest out there, probably the biggest out there as far as games go. So everyone's like, oh, it's going to release through Steam. And then all of a sudden it wasn't going to release through Steam because the listing was removed. And everyone's like, oh, Nintendo's ninjas swooped in. So Nintendo shared a comment on this situation. They said, quote, Nintendo is committed to protecting the hard work and creativity of video game engineers and developers. The emulator illegally circumvents Nintendo's protection measures and runs illegal copies of games. Using illegal emulators or illegal copies of games harms development and ultimately stifles innovation. Nintendo respects the intellectual property rights of other companies and in turn expects others to do the same. So they were saying, hey, we respect Valve's crap and Valve should respect us. So, of course, not surprisingly, the internet lost its mind over this because they are very pro emulator. It seemed, I don't know if it's a vocal minority, a vocal majority, the actual majority. I don't know. But 9 times out of 10, you will see people talking about emulation and it's good and it's not illegal.
Good, right?
Bing Ching says, Bing Chilling. You guys should pull Nintendo's hog out from your throat. Emulation isn't illegal. Emulation isn't illegal. Emulation isn't illegal. Nintendo is an oligarchy. Nintendo is an oligarchy. Nintendo is an oligarchy. Just reading it as it was written. So, yes, Nintendo's comment on illegal emulator. Emulation isn't illegal. I want to make that clear. Emulation is not illegal. But Nintendo's approach is most likely that the emulator that we're talking about here, I don't know all the specifics. I'm not a tech guy, but this was backed up by people who create and work on emulators. It uses some sort of key, and the key is gotten from Nintendo and is not allowed by Nintendo. So legally, if this went to court, Nintendo would have ground to stand on. Now, could there be emulators that don't use whatever this key is? Again, I know this sounds like somebody's grandpa talking about this who doesn't know all the details. I don't know the tech specs, but there's a key that is used that is not provided by Nintendo to people freely to make emulators.
Does the emulator use the Wi-Fi?
yes. Emulators do connect to the internet. Yes.
Just answer the question. Does it use the Wi-Fi?
Kind of
Will
creepy.
It harm my children? So that was the legal, I guess I'll say loophole, or the legal means by which Nintendo could take this to court and make at least a very good argument that this is not allowed. So when Nintendo says illegal emulators, that's their approach. They're not saying emulators are illegal. They are saying this Dolphin emulator uses a key that was ill-gotten. So, of course, like I said, the internet went...
Why don't you get a key then?
And again, feel free to collect me in the comments. And I know I'm going to get raked over the coals for it. I am not pro-emulation. I am not against emulation. As I've said many times in the past, I have used emulators. I downloaded games that I once owned, and I downloaded games that I never owned, and I just played them. And then one day it hit me, I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. I don't own the games. That's how I personally feel. It's wrong, and I shouldn't do it. I made that decision. Now, I think we can all, at the very least, agree that going into a store and stealing anything off the shelf or taking anything off the shelf without paying for it and leaving the store is stealing. So if you did that with a video game in a store, I think we would all agree that is stealing, and that's where I'll leave it. So I'm sure some people won't agree with that, but it is what it is. And again, I'm not. I recognize some of these games aren't on sale anymore. I recognize Nintendo hasn't sold some of these games for decades. I recognize you can't buy a brand new GameCube anymore. I recognize all that.
So what do you
stuff.
say to that? Tough luck.
Well, my thing is, if Nintendo's not selling a game anymore, that doesn't legally make it right for you to steal it. Like, just because any company doesn't sell something anymore, doesn't sell a product, that doesn't mean legally you can steal it. That's what I'm saying. That's all that I'm saying. You can't legally steal something because some company doesn't provide it anymore.
What if you just download it, play it, and then delete it when you're done? That's like borrowing.
Well, you argue that in the court. Yeah, go right ahead.
Or if you, well, they're stealing it, but like they're not really stealing it because the copy is still with whoever they're stealing it from, right? So like the person still has a copy of it because it's digitally being stolen, right?
So you're saying since digital copies are infinite?
Yeah.
So you're not saying that.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to see
the original.
I'm trying to be a devil's advocate because I don't know anything about like the other side. Because I agree
All right,
with you.
Here, I got a question. Tell me how you get from the verified legal copy bought by a person to the one downloading it from the internet that doesn't own the game. Tell me how you get the legal. How do you make so the person on the beginning side is legal? How do you get to the other person and have that be legal?
Well, I'm sure it's not legal.
Okay. All right. There we
go.
Yeah. Again, I understand the frustration of Nintendo or any company not offering something forever because you'll be like, they haven't sold this game in 20 years. They haven't sold this album in 50 years. They haven't sold this movie in 100 years or 60 years, whatever. I get it. And you're like, I want it. I also get that. But I'm strictly speaking from a legal perspective. That does not give you the right to just get that for free. That's not how it works. You can't legally do that. Should you be able to? I can see an argument for that to be made.
What
That's
about like
all I'm
old
saying.
Game Boy games or something, or old NES games that are outside of like, aren't they like free or fair? Not fair trade.
It's not how things work.
But I mean, if there's no other way to play it and you wanted to play it again,
that's why people do it. But that doesn't make it illegal.
So what would be the legal course of action?
You would buy a secondhand copy.
And
Tough luck, basically.
And then it's broken. Or
listen, I'm not
work.
saying that the solution is there for this problem. I'm just saying what you're doing isn't legal because of it. Should there. Well, that's the thing. How do you make the solution of? How do you make a solution for?
I understand, but then even if you're buying a secondhand copy, it's on the company's not getting the money anyway. So like,
I understand
you're giving
that.
some other person.
I understand that, but at the very least, the product you are getting was actually produced by all parties involved, and they made their money on it. So they are not selling it anymore. I get that, but you have an actual real product that was made by the real companies, whereas online you're getting the software that was made by the companies, but you're not getting it through any sort of legal manner. You're like Chippendale on or Milon's Secret Castle on the NES wasn't made available for all digital platforms everywhere. It was like on the Wii Virtual Console and you needed a Wii to play it. It was never released online freely publicly to play anywhere. Developers do that. They're like, here's a ROM, you can't buy our game anymore. Okay, then you're free. Then go do whatever you want. That's 100% legal. It was put out by the developer. You're good to go. But other developers don't do that because they don't want to do that with their property. They want to make money off it some other way, or they just don't do it.
I mean, but like, I feel like there should be some sort of time frame or something, like 15 years. If they don't offer it for sale,
that's great.
For 10 or 15 years, then it should
that's
be,
great.
You know,
then we need that law.
No,
this
that's
is
what
I'm saying.
I'm not saying like.
I agree.
I just think I think that's what should be addressed or something, because like,
I agree.
If you're not actively or like aspiring, like interested in making money on that intellectual property for a certain period of time, then like then just make it available or something. But they're not going to just make it available. They're going to make it
Yes.
available for you to buy it.
I agree. Also, we have to recognize this sounds like rah big corporate. We have to recognize that they own it, so it's theirs to do what they want with. Now, I'm not saying I like that. I'm just saying that's legally the
But-
case. They own it. So, yes, I agree. There should be some discussion of a law that if a company doesn't release a movie, a TV show, a soundtrack, a game, or it's been out of print for so many decades or whatever it may be, then there should be some way for an interested customer to obtain it legally. I agree with that.
Make a horror
So then
movie
what
out
will
of it.
happen is if that precedent happens, then those companies will obviously turn that into you need to pay to get it and it will be available forever, but you have to pay. And then people will be like, that's not what I want anyway. And they're going to steal it anyway, because what they really want is they want it for free. So there are people legitimately who will say, I'll pay the money for this. I'll take it legitimately. I'll do it legally, but I have no avenue to do that through. Please make that avenue available for me. There are people who will do that. I would do that. I have done that, but we need a law for that kind of stuff, and that's not going to happen.
How did you play Mother 3? Was that an emulator or was that something else?
That is an emulator. That's the only Nintendo game that I can think of where Nintendo knows that's happening and does nothing about it purposefully. They will never speak about it publicly because then we'll be in this situation.
It makes this situation look
Nintendo
weird,
would have 1 bazillion% squashed that right away. No questions asked. But they're not touching that game with the 50-foot pole. So they're like,
do they just not want to bring any attention to it at all? Like any attention on either side of it?
I think that's pretty much it.
Just because then people will be like, all the woke people will be like up in arms about the game not being appropriate or like
I just
content wise.
I think yes, that I especially it's always been a touchy subject for Nintendo content wise, even when it originally came out, because outside of Japan it would be viewed very differently. But in today's day and age, it would be viewed, it would be taken to both extremes.
Is it considered an offensive game, or was it? I thought it was done as an ally, or not really. I guess before
in Japan it would not be seen as offensive. Outside of Japan it would be seen as offensive, but it is not conveying a message that is meant to be offensive. It is supposed to be in support of, yes, but outside of Japan it would be looked at negatively, and to some degree you would look at it now and be like, oh yeah, I don't know about some of this stuff, even knowing where it's coming from. But that's judging through the lens of today, things that came out decades ago. That's a whole different discussion. But the game's original intention was of support and allyship. So that's all good. But there's a whole bunch of tropes and customs and things that happen in Japan that are normal for Japan. And outside of Japan, people would be horrified. And that goes for every country and every region. That's everywhere. So that's just... And to take that game and take that stuff out would take out the heart of the game too. So that's a situation where localization would probably ruin the game. So I don't think they'll ever do it. But stranger things have happened. Star Fox 2 got released officially. So
is the game fun?
Oh, bringing up Reggie with Mother, that's also funny.
Star Fox wasn't cruising around with like transgender people or something, right? Or
no, but that wasn't. But Star Fox 2 released, or was supposed to release on the Super Nintendo, got canceled at the last minute. The game was complete. I would have never guessed that 25 years later, Nintendo would actually put it out on a piece of hardware.
25
That's
years
crazy.
later, a Twin Peaks reference.
However many years it was, I don't know. But yes, the only, I guess, equally strange things have happened, I should say, rather than stranger things. But there have been things that Nintendo has done that have surprised me. Mother 3 would certainly be the most surprising.
Mother.
But anyway, all this emulator stuff. There you go. That's my stance. Like I said, eat me alive in the comments. I hope I gave it some nuanced discussion. I am not pooping on people who do it illegally. I have done it in the past. I do not do it anymore. I'm not saying I'm better than you. I'm saying personally, I have decided it is not something I feel good doing. I'm telling you, do what you want. If you want to ignore the legality, go ahead. If you're wishy-washy on it, that's fine. I'm not saying anything about what you do. I'm saying what I do. I'm just saying legally, it is illegal to get a game you don't own. Like you're just pulling. What I did was illegal. Like what many of us did was illegal. And then, you're young and or some of you are young and stupid. And then you're like, I shouldn't have done that stuff. Just like we do with lots of other things when we're kids. We move on, we grow up, and we think about things differently. Or you don't. So anyway, that hubbub happened. Then later in the week, we found out another interesting tidbit here. It wasn't Nintendo who contacted Steam about getting this emulator removed. It was Steam who contacted Nintendo to let them know that it was going to be on the platform because they figured Nintendo wouldn't want it there. So Valve's spokesperson Casey Aitchison, who talked to Kotaku, said, quote, given Nintendo's history of taking action against some emulators, we brought this to their attention proactively after the Dolphin team announced it was coming soon to Steam. End quote. They released a whole big statement along with that as well. Now, here's the thing, Nintendo, we saw all the legal documents. Nintendo thanked Valve for telling them it was happening, all that stuff. But we also found out Valve also probably did it because Valve could have been held responsible for this. And sometimes you see things like YouTube or any website where it's like user created content is posted there and it breaks some guidelines, copyright or whatever it may be. And the platform holder can't legally be held responsible for that. They take the actions to remove it. But, if somebody uploads the Super Mario Brothers movie to YouTube, YouTube might hear about it, but YouTube doesn't get in trouble with it or in trouble for it because they don't know this guy's going to do that. The guy that did it gets in trouble. YouTube just has to remove it now that they know it's there. With the Steam situation, it's different because of the whole legal breakdown is there. But if it was on the store, Valve could have been held responsible for it. So Nintendo had 100% legal right to sue Valve. Now, here's two things. Nintendo knew that and Valve knew that. And Valve was like, Nintendo could sue us for this. So they stepped in and were like, hey, Nintendo, this is going to happen. You probably don't want it, right? Nintendo's like, yeah, we don't want it. So
they were just covering their own butt, but you can't blame them. And I don't think
because basically, if Valve didn't do it, it would have been an open and shut case for Nintendo, and Nintendo would Nintendo have sued them? I think they would have tried to settle it a different way. But if they went to court, Valve would have no legal leg to stand on, and Valve would have lost. Like, it's cut and dry. So,
but why is this even important? Are we just trying to talk crap on Valve and say like they wouldn't have done it if they didn't have to? Like, because it's nice that they did that.
No, it's not a gotcha. It's important because it's the whole story.
Okay, yeah.
We tell the whole story with every news story, or at least we try
the whole
to.
Story.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I'm just teasing you, man.
And with that, let's talk about the news from this past week that we just spent while we were sitting here listening to that story.
Entropy says everyone fears Nintendo's ninjas. There you go. And here's the thing. Here's talking about dunking on the internet. The original story
speaking of
was
dunking,
a shovel storm on the
National
internet.
Donut Day?
As far as comments, as you and I discussed, there was lots of that.
Dunking donuts.
The follow-up that gives you the full picture, nobody talks about that. They've already made up their mind after the first decision. They know all the facts. They don't want to hear anything else. So there you go. So that's why we tell the full story, because there are people out there who want to hear the full story.
What are the new facts, though? I mean, we got what we needed.
What'd you get? You tell me then.
Nintendo emulation stuff. I think they're going to rebrand it as the GameCube emulator now.
But it also does Wii games.
Whoops.
Ooh.
And what was the animal it's called?
Dolphin.
Hey,
but Dolphin was the
GameCube
code name, wasn't it?
I don't know. Look it up.
It was Eagle.
It definitely was. I don't know why he's being like this.
Oh, we were talking about the full story. It was a joke about the full story. You got to look it up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Boy. Yes, it was called Dolphin.
I don't get it.
You said, why bother telling the second half of the story? I said, because it's important to give the full story.
There's another half?
He wanted the full side of the story about what their prototype was called. And I said, look it up because it's the full story.
That's funny.